Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this evening's live stream for the preview and predicted 11 for Real Madrid versus Chelsea in the second leg of the Champions League. The Blues facing pretty much mission impossible in the Bernabeu tomorrow night. 2 goals down from the first leg with a 3-1 deficit. It's very unlikely, all things considered. I think only one team has actually overturned a 2-goal deficit in the home leg. And that is actually Man United when they lost 2-0 at Old Trafford against PSG. And then they went to the Parc des Princes and won 3-1, I think. And Romelu Lukaku, of all people, scored twice on that evening. That obviously is not going to happen tomorrow because he's not made the squad. But yeah, it's going to be a tricky task. Let's make no mistake about it. And from my point of view, as long as we give it 100% effort, do our best, leave everything out on the pitch, what will be, will be. And, that's all we can ask for. And I'm delighted to be joined by Chelsea fan Oli Carpenter. Oli, mate, thank you so much for your time. Welcome back to the channel.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all, mate. What are your thoughts? How do you see the game tomorrow? We always believe it's Chelsea, it's Champions League. But if we're being honest and being realistic, this is very much mission impossible for us, isn't it, tomorrow night?
Yeah, never say never. But, we were having a little bit of a chat about this before we jumped on live, and I was saying it would probably take a really special performance against a very good Real Madrid side. And I think the main issue is you can't see them not scoring, especially with the likes of Vinicius and Benzema, especially at home. So then you've got to overturn. Actually, it's more of you could then say it's technically a 3-goal deficit, and then in that sort of situation you have to win 3-1, 4-1. And then it starts to look a little bit like dreamland territory.
Yeah, no, it really does. As I said, a lot of things have got to go right for us. And, we had 2 poor results, the Brentford and then the first leg as well. We returned to winning ways with a bang. I wasn't expecting a 6-0 win against Southampton at all. There were a few changes there. Good that we got to rest key players. Kai Havertz coming off at half-time, getting a much-needed rest. Thiago Silva getting a bit of a breather as well. Reece James only playing about half an hour. So some key players able to get a bit of a breather there, and hopefully they'll be 100% raring to go for tomorrow night. But the first leg we're very much outclassed, really frustrating. Get ourselves back into the game at 2-1 just before half time. We make the changes, go for it at the back, and we think, right, we're going to have a real go at this. Let's get ourselves back to 2-2, or maybe even win the game. And less than a minute into the second half, Mendy makes a horrific error and it deflates the atmosphere. And at that point, you're sort of thinking, the tie is very much done. First leg for me, Benzema, obviously the difference maker for sure. Really goes to show what having a world-class striker at the top end of the pitch can do for you. Someone that just literally can make something out of nothing, only needs one chance to score. And we saw that in full evidence at the Bridge. But for me, one of the key areas was in the midfield. We looked massively overrun. He went with the Jorginho Kante pivot. And it just didn't really work. Modric, Casemiro, Kroos, Valverde on the left wing, dropping in at times to make it a 4. That against our 2 was a real problem. How do you see that as a key area of the pitch tomorrow night, making sure that we don't get overrun in midfield and we kind of dominate that midfield a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. You can see the differences and the parallels between our game against them last week and also the Champions League games from the season before. In those games, the way we set up, we definitely set up to sort of take on their midfield, and we won the midfield battle, and that's why we won both games so effectively. I suppose we drew one, didn't we? But it was a much better game, much better performance when we ran the midfield. You need a few things for that. I think you need Kante firing, and at the moment I don't think he is firing. I think he's probably struggling because he's probably being overplayed. And it's almost impossible not to overplay Kante because he's so good, and then eventually he needs a bit of a rest. So it's a bit of a gamble whether you play him or not. I don't think you play Jorginho. Personally, I think especially Valverde, I thought he was brilliant for them. Last week he was doing a lot of sort of the ugly stuff, a lot of the running, and it really made a difference against our midfield, which looked quite slow and quite lackluster, especially in the build up when Jorginho had the ball. So I think it's got to be, if you realistically, if you're looking at a midfield, a 2-man deep midfield, you're looking at Kante and Kovacic, but in that case, you also need to slightly tweak the tactics from last week as well. If you're Tuchel, to allow, I don't know, Reece James to drop into midfield, or Alonso on that left hand side to drop into midfield, even Havertz to come down to drop into that midfield, or Mount, because there needs to be that extra support, and there needs to be that extra man who's running around and helping open passing lanes, because otherwise we're just going to get absolutely folded by their midfield again.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we need a lot more energy in there as well, which Kovacic will definitely give us. Obviously we'll get into the lineup later on, but I think a Kante Kovacic pivot is probably my preferred one. I know we saw that against Southampton on the weekend. As you said, Kante is struggling by his high standards, but whenever he's fit, he seems to play. And yes, this would be the fourth game in a row that he would be starting, but Tuchel seems to play him whenever he's fit, and he knows best. And obviously, we fully trust in him, and it'll just give us that bit more energy, few more tackles flying in, trying to win the ball high at the pitch, take advantage of those transitions that we did so well against Southampton. I know Southampton is a completely different proposition compared to Real Madrid, but I just feel like if he went with a Jorginho in there, like, for me, the fact that we need 2 goals. We're basically starting this game. Well, we're starting this game 3-1 down. So Jorginho is the kind of guy that you would use if you're looking to control the game, slow it down, frustrate teams a little bit later on. If we were, somehow in a position where with 20 minutes, half an hour to go or something, we're going through, he's a kind of player that you'd bring on to, slow that game down, etc. I don't think from the off, when you're chasing a game, Jorginho's skill set is necessarily, what we might need. But another interesting point is obviously the formation. Generally speaking, we go in the back 5 or back 3, whatever you want to call it. But we have seen Tuchel use the back 4 a bit more recently. Obviously, we went back 4 against Brentford. We went back 4 in the second half against Real Madrid in the first leg. How do you see the formation lining up? We went back 5 at the weekend. Again, we saw Ruben Loftus-Cheek play right wing back to give Reece James a rest. There's options there. I mean, what would you be inclined to go with tomorrow? I mean, for me personally, I'd probably go with the back 5, just because I know we're chasing the game, but as I was saying to you before we come live, like, it's you've got to strike a fine balance between not completely going gung-ho in the first 10-15 minutes, getting hit on the break, and then the game's completely done. You want to stay in the game for as long as possible, try and get an early goal if you can, and then work from there. And that's why I'd rather start with the 3 at the back, and then, as the game unfolds, and if it's still, 20, 30 minutes left and we still need a goal or 2, then switch to the back 4, take a few more risks rather than going too soon and getting ourselves completely out the game before it's even started, really. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think you definitely need to do, at least you'd have to start with a back 5. One, because why would you change what won 6-0 at the weekend, right? But on top of that, I don't think Chelsea look as defensively solid in a back 4. I don't think that's really news to anybody. We look much better in a back 3, but what happens is it does slightly stifle our creativity. Which is what I was and it's weird saying that after we've won 6-0 at the weekend, but it was interesting seeing Loftus-Cheek play on that wing-back role, especially because it was something we haven't sort of seen before. And he sort of drifted up. He was quite good at bombing up and down that right-hand side. I thought he had a very good game. I don't think it would be wise to start him at right wing-back against the likes of Vinicius, Valverde, Benzema, just because, one, it's not his preferred position. I don't think it's the time for experimenting, and you're just asking to be cut open because he doesn't play that position very often, if at all. And the other thing, I think you need your best players in your best positions, and I'm not sure Loftus-Cheek is there yet. I said last week he was painfully mediocre in another podcast. He's proved me wrong at least a little bit with his performance against Southampton. I want to see that consistency from him in games going forward, but not this one. It's too important. So I think it all depends on how long we're going to, like you say, how long we're going to stay in the game, especially with the tactics that Tuchel picks about, how we're going to try and break them down as well. If we're going on the wings, we definitely need a back 5, because that way we're going to have the wing backs overlapping to become like wingers. If we're going through the centre, then one of the wing backs would potentially need to move into midfield, like we've seen back when Reece James and God, I miss him, Ben Chilwell wasn't injured. So I think it's all going to depend a little bit on how we set up to play against Real Madrid. But I would expect a three at the back, personally.
Yeah, no, I think it suits what we've got, and it's definitely our most competent formation, and it's one that allows us to be defensively solid and keep ourselves in the game, which is really important that we do that. And also for me, if we did go a back four, Reece James is one of our most important attacking outlets, and a flat back four, so much of that is nullified. You can't get, not that you can't get forward in a back four, but it's nowhere near as effective as if you were playing as a wing back compared to a conventional fullback. And that would also serve up an issue on the opposite flank where Marcos Alonso, for all his for his skill set that he's got, the back four is not part of it. And we saw that against Brentford, and we cannot see Marcos Alonso in a back four. Would I trust Azpilicueta at left back and a back four a lot more than Alonso? But obviously he's been out with COVID, don't know how bad he's had it, etc.
It creates a bit of it hamstrings, it sort of hamstrings the team. If you make it a back four, then Reece James has to be at right back. Then you get the question of who's at left back. It has to be Azpilicueta because Alonso is defensively inept, right? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. He's just defensively inept. So you have to play Azpilicueta, who's probably not quite fit enough. I'm sure he keeps very well, but he's just had COVID, and we know how it has affected athletes, especially. And so before a big game, it's just not worth it. So then, against someone who's going to absolutely try and torch him on that side, like Valverde, or if Vinicius swaps wings, it's just he's going to get absolutely destroyed. Not to mention, bear in mind, the left wing back oftentimes, especially when we play as a four, the left back drops back into a three as we move forward. Which, so it means that Azpilicueta or, either you negate Alonso's attacking threat by putting him in a back three, which is pointless, or you leave Azpilicueta out there. And then you have someone like Reece James in midfield, so you almost set up with like a 3-3 from back to midfield. But I'm just not sure if that, I'm not sure it's worth taking that risk yet with Azpilicueta. I think sometimes you do need a captain, you need a captain's performance, but I think that's why we've got Thiago Silva. And I think he'll be able to do that job, hopefully. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, do you think, obviously, we touched on the midfield, the problem getting overrun in midfield in the first leg. I mean, do you think there's any chance that we go with three in the middle and a front two? The situation where we could see Ruben as a six, or we could see Jorginho in that single six with Kante and Kovacic ahead of him. And then we have a front two of maybe a Kai Havertz and Pulisic, or dare I say Timo Werner, which I probably shouldn't. But could you envisage a situation where potentially, we could go 3-5-2 maybe, or perhaps when we're defending, maybe it becomes more of a 3-4-1-2 kind of thing with Mount playing potentially a 10 behind the two front men. So when we're defending, he drops into midfield to make that extra man. There's possibilities to be quite fluid in that way as well. But I'm not sure. I think if we'd had a lead from the first leg, I would have expected us to perhaps go with all three in central midfield. But the fact we're chasing the game, I think that maybe negates it. But I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of going 3-5-2?
It's an interesting prospect for sure, especially when what you were saying about having Mount dropping back into midfield. I think probably you don't end up with Jorginho if you do go with three in midfield. I think what you actually end up doing is you set up on paper as a 3-5-2. You have Mount in midfield, who then bombs on to attack and when we're attacking, it switches to a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-1-2. I think that would probably make more sense because it brings in a lot more energy than Jorginho's got. And I just don't think Jorginho is the person. He's not. I don't think he's the right person for the game. He might come on, he might start, and he might prove us all wrong. But I think the only other issue is that we all expect Kovacic, Kante, Jorginho midfield to work. On paper, it's a completely well-balanced midfield, and it just never works. And I'm not really sure why. It's why Tuchel's paid a lot of money to manage the team, and I'm not. But it just does not work. So I think if you're going to go with three in midfield, it has to be Mount over Jorginho, who then bombs on up the pitch when we're attacking.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's there's definitely, maneuverability to be flexible in that formation. Even if we go 3-4-3, you can still make that kind of a 3-4-1-2. Particularly when defending, Mount can drop in from that right-hand side. I mean, we presume that Pulisic probably start on the left. Not really his strong point to drop in and form a three-man midfield. So it'd very much be Mount dropping in there as the extra man. So, yeah, there's definitely, maneuverability within the system to do a couple of different things, which could really help us out. In terms of, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about Real Madrid. Obviously, we played them last season in the semi-finals. By all accounts, I think this year they're far better than what they were last year. I think they look a bit of a better team under Ancelotti. He seems to get them playing a lot better. Karim Benzema, who had a good season last season, is having a phenomenal season this year. Vinicius Jr. really stepping up. The midfield that seems to keep going on and on of Kroos, Modric, Casemiro seems to be really performing very well. And I think Casemiro said after the game last week that it was probably the best 90 minutes of football Madrid have played all season. And I don't think you could really argue too much of that. We've touched on the midfield battle being important, but I guess Karim Benzema put us to the sword in that first leg. How do we deal with him? He's red hot form, probably the in-form striker on the planet, along with Harry Kane and probably Robert Lewandowski. How do we stop him? I know that's a tricky question, but what do we need to do better in the in the second leg than what we did in the first leg?
Well, I think part of the issue is tactics, and part of the issue is personnel. So we all saw Christensen get absolutely torched by Vinicius all game in the previous leg. I don't think he played very well. I think even by his standards, he occasionally drops a clanger, but this season he's done very well. But last week was an absolute disaster for him. And I think that was a tactical mistake, putting him in such a position to be up against Vinicius one-on-one, which then allowed Vinicius to knock the ball ahead of him, run into space, and allowed him to combine so effectively with Benzema. And I think that's where a lot of their strength comes from. So I think we have to be a lot more. It's difficult, and it's like what you were saying about at the start. It's about finding that balance between defensive solidity, which means being able to hold off the likes of Vinicius and Benzema, and also being able to go forward in attack, which again ultimately is why I think we need a back five. It's a difficult thing how you actually stop him being Benzema, because he's clearly one of the best strikers in the world at the moment, if not the best striker in the world in form. And it makes me think that France are going to win the World Cup for sure if you stick him and Mbappe up front. How could you lose, right? But I think the way you probably stop him is you have to be really, really defensively well organized. You have to defend really compact when you are defending, and you've probably got to cut off his passing lane from Vinicius. Then after that, he'll be isolated three central defenders versus one, or at least 2-on-1. And from there, I think you've got a better chance. He's the sort of player who can turn a half chance or even a quarter chance into a goal. He can turn something something out of nothing, and win games by himself. And we saw that in the return fixture. So I think the important thing is if you cut off his supply, well, then he's not getting the ball. And, when he does get the ball, if you absolutely swarm him, then he's not able to do what he does.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think actually the key, as you said, the key to stopping Benzema really is limiting that supply chain. And that's pretty much majorly coming from Vinicius. It's not all coming from Vinicius, but Real Madrid by all means are going to line up exactly the same as they did in the first leg. Obviously, Eder Militao is suspended, so it'll be Nacho dropping back into centre half, which we could potentially take advantage of. So it's not as good as Militao, but he's still a capable footballer. But yeah, if you can try and stop Vinicius, Valverde is not going to be offering a lot in terms of supply. Obviously, Modric and Kroos can thread balls from midfield. But yeah, if we can stop Vinicius, then a lot of Benzema's supply chain is cut off, and in theory, he should be a bit more nullified. But at the same time, as you said, he only needs a sniff, and it's in the back of the net. And let's make no mistake about it, Real Madrid are going to have opportunities tomorrow. The more the game goes on, the more we push forward and look in search of those goals, spaces will occur at the back. And he's one man that will 100% take advantage of them. So we just got to be on it, and we just need to be. It's
the other thing about why playing five in midfield is so important. possibly tomorrow. But getting that midfield right, whether we play 4 or 5, is going to be really important, especially in terms of stopping. If the game plan is to cut off Benzema, then you have to stop it coming from midfield as well, which means you have to overrun the midfield. So then, in that case, you're definitely going to want 3 in midfield. And why like we were speaking about before, that's got to be Mount then, and not Jorginho, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's probably too big a game for Ruben as well. If I love Ruben. A lot of Chelsea fans like Ruben. They really want him to do well, but I think he could make an impact from the bench for sure. But I think from the off, I think this is perhaps too big an occasion for him. And that's just my opinion. But I do think it's a little bit too much for him. But yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting. It's going to ebb and flow for sure. And I mean, obviously we've touched on that. Benzema needs to be kept quiet. I mean, how important is it that? I mean, it's an obvious answer, but that we cut out these individual errors, because Mendy's mistake, is really. I don't want to say it's cost us the tie. We could have let in another goal regardless of that mistake. But it very much feels like that's kind of virtually put us out. We cannot afford any individual mistakes tomorrow. Need 100% concentration. Do you think the guys have got it in them to give it 100% and just not make any really costly errors, because the errors have cost us in recent weeks?
I mean, listen, this is the team that went entirely through the Champions League last season with only letting in 4 goals.
Yeah.
Right. These guys know how to be defensively compact. They know how to be defensively resolute, and they know how to snuff out mistakes. They also know how to ride their luck, and that's important as well. So I think they know how to do it. It's just about whether they do it. And I think the Mendy mistake, unfortunately, is the worst time for it to happen. But we all kind of saw it coming, in my opinion. You'd seen again in the Brentford game. I think he passed the ball straight to Ivan Toney a few times this season. He's not done very well when he's had the ball at his feet and he's been under pressure, and he's made mistakes because of it. And I think now that that's been exploited, it will be easy for people to spot and to try and do it again. So that is something that we really need to make sure doesn't happen. So we need to make sure Mendy feels secure. And I think after that, I think the players who are the most likely to make sort of mistakes, individual errors that are going to lead to goals. I mean, the one that comes up the most, and it seems to happen the most, or at least Twitter talks about it the most, is Jorginho. So I think ultimately, tomorrow's too big a game for him. But I think there's a real importance in making sure that Mendy, keeps his head, as it were, because I think if he's under pressure, you never know what could happen. But like I said, these players know what they're doing. They're professional. They know how not to make mistakes. It's just about whether they do or not.
Yeah, and we obviously we know this competition well. We won it last season. We've had special memories in there. I mean, wouldn't it be great? Could you imagine the scenes if there was like a recreation of the Torres in the new camp, and it was Timo Werner rounding the keeper to put us through? I mean, that would be. It's
an interesting prospect about whether he plays or not, isn't it? Because I said it's hard for me to say in one breath that Loftus-Cheek shouldn't play, right? And then on the other hand, because he had a good game against Southampton, and then to say that Werner should. But Werner did score twice, and he could have scored about 5. Yeah, he could have scored about 5. So, the other thing is they're probably gonna, Real Madrid are probably gonna play a lot more of a defensive game than Southampton. They're probably not gonna have as much space around the back as Southampton. So I would be remiss to say that we should at least start with Werner. I think if we score early, we blow the game open, right? Yeah. And then Werner becomes invaluable because he provides that threat in behind, and they can't rest on their laurels after that. So it's almost like I'd be more tempted to bring Werner. Will almost certainly come on, I would say, but I don't know if he'll start.
No, my reasoning for him not starting is the fact that those 2 goals at the weekend, those were his 8th and 9th Premier League goals for Chelsea. He scored 9 goals in almost 2 seasons in the Premier League. I mean, let's not, let's credit where it's due. It was a good performance, but let's not try and, pretend that this is suddenly the second coming of Timo Werner. He scored, I think, four goals in 5 appearances against Southampton, and then 4 in 47 against the rest of the league. So
yeah, it's not great.
It's not great, and that for me, that was very, very much exactly to his skill set. For whatever reason, Southampton played the most ridiculously high line, so much space in behind. There was no pressing on the ball. Everyone had so much time on the ball. They were making all sorts of errors at the back. And
they definitely made it easy for him, didn't they?
They made it easy for him. And Real Madrid are not going to do that. Southampton is probably one of the only teams that Timo Werner is effective against. There's no low block. There's nothing. Whereas majority of other teams, are going to enforce a low block, which is why we've not seen him be very effective at all. So for those reasons, I wouldn't start him in this game. I do agree with you that, though, as the game becomes stretched, and if we do, go 1-up early doors, maybe last 15, 20 minutes, we're looking for that second goal, then he is definitely someone that could be a threat off the bench. But I think from the start, very much, it doesn't suit his skill set. There's not space in behind. You've got to dribble, and Timo is not good at dribbling. So,
no. Werner's what, you've got to play the ball sort of like either long or over the top so he can chase it. And he's not very good with his back to goal with the ball to feet. We've seen that. Lukaku was supposed to be good at that, and he's not good at that. So I think that leaves you have to sort of start Havertz and then Havertz plus whoever. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because to a certain, like you say, he's not had a good career for Chelsea, and you can't just let 2 goals. It's a difficult thing because in one way, 2 goals and a 6-0 is much less valuable than 2 goals and a 2-0 or something like that, isn't it? And he has scored, and it's good to see that brings his confidence back up. And I personally really like the guy, as a person. I'm not sure how I feel about him as a footballer still. It just feels like maybe it's a bit too much of a leap. It's the same with Loftus-Cheek, where you have a good game against a team who isn't as good as Real Madrid, who don't play the same as Real Madrid, and then you want to play them against Real Madrid. It personally for me, it just doesn't work.
No, I completely agree with that. I just think the step up in quality is far too much. I know he was an important part of the Champions League winning run, etc. I know he didn't contribute a lot of goals, but he was a bit of a nuisance. But yeah, I just don't think it. I agree. I think it's just too much of a step up in class for Werner, unfortunately. I just wanted to talk about Romelu Lukaku, obviously not available tomorrow, Achilles problem, along with Callum Hudson-Odoi, who's also got Achilles trouble, no Ben Chilwell, and Ross Barkley's ill, which is not the end of the world. He wasn't going to play anyway, so it doesn't really matter. To be honest, Lukaku's not lived up to expectations. We know that. But having said that, part of me was thinking that this game could have been a game that he would have actually been very useful for. I mean, how much of I don't want to say blow, but how much, for want of a better word, I'll use it. How much of a blow is it that we can't really call upon him at all tomorrow?
I mean, he offers something tactically different, but we even saw that when we wanted to do something tactically different last week, he still couldn't score. He still, fluffed a fair few chances. And like you said earlier, last week was the absolute epitome of showing what a world-class striker does versus what someone like Lukaku can do, which is to say not much. And so to a certain degree, yeah, it is a loss because, it's nice to be able to offer something tactically different, but he doesn't really, at the moment at least, in the terms of a game, he doesn't really move the needle. So I'm not sure if it's going to be the biggest loss, if I'm honest. I would much rather see someone like Pulisic, play maybe like a false 9 or play up top, or as part of a 2 with Havertz, or even as part of a 3. And it's difficult, but I think that's got to be the preferred thing. I don't think we'll miss him that much, honestly.
No, my only thought process behind it was obviously, substitutions are going to be important tomorrow. We're going to be chasing goals. That's an absolute given. There's 5 substitutions, and I just think we're not going to have very many attacking players on the bench. We're going to have perhaps a Hakim Ziyech and a Timo Werner in terms of potential goals. Otherwise, there's no other goals off the bench. I just think
it doesn't really fill us with confidence, does it? There's the possibility of Sal coming into midfield. He's not a goal scorer, but he does know how to take a shot. It doesn't
But yeah,
inspire a lot of
no,
confidence,
it
though.
doesn't. That was just my. He was never going to start, in my opinion. But just as a goal scoring option from the bench or a goal threat from the bench, like a physical presence to chuck up at the top end of the pitch and just maybe bounce a few things off, hold the ball up, bring someone into play or whatever. Those options can be invaluable, and the benches could be really important. And unfortunately, due to injuries and etc., we are not going to have very many goal scoring threats from the bench, which leaves it down to realistically the starting 11 to pretty
It might
much
be worth
get the
it
business
might be
done.
worth saying though, that when we do have Lukaku, we often try and play through him too much.
Yeah.
And like I think that everyone notices that like everyone tries to sort of pass him the ball, and it's a bit weird, how we sort of forget every other player exists when Lukaku's up front.
Hmm.
And maybe that's tactical, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's strategic from Tuchel, but it certainly gives us that one thing that I think will really help us if we're not playing Lukaku is having that sort of tactical extreme fluidity like we had last season, where you've got the like of Mount, Havertz, Werner, and then to a lesser degree Pulisic and even Ziyech, who can all sort of switch positions on that front line, and it runs absolute riot and causes a lot of havoc among defenders. Whether and they don't have their first choice defender in net, it's hard to know whether whether that will affect them, especially a couple goals up. But I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, no, 100%. Before we get into the predicted 11, I just wanted to very quickly get your thoughts on something to do with the ownerships. Quick, very slight side tangent here. Obviously, come out today that I'm just going to bring it up on the screen now. An article in The Athletic, basically, all four preferred Chelsea bidders have expressed desire for Marina Granovskaya to stay. She won't decide until Chelsea are sold. Depends on their proposal and her plans. Obviously, an important part of the well, I say the boardroom of the off the pitch activities, for want of a better phrase. Been here for a long time. Obviously, has been associated with Roman Abramovich for well over sort of 19, 20 years. Very much the person behind the contracts, the deals, etc. We obviously don't know what our future plans are going to be. For me, it makes sense with a big change, such as a change in ownership. You want to keep as many things, as many pieces of the puzzle in place as possible, even if it's just for the short term. And then you can decide a little bit further on if you want to make more structural changes. So for me, it makes sense to keep her around in the short term if she wants to stay, and then obviously decide from there. I mean, if Tuchel's happy working with her, you want to keep that sort of that structure in place. You don't want to come in, upset the apple cart too soon, and cause issues there. I mean, would you, whoever the new owners end up being, are you very much of the thought process that keeping Marina on if she wants to stay, at least in the short term, is the right thing to do?
I couldn't have put it better myself in what you said. It's that when you've got some kind of transition like this, where a lot of things are changing and a lot of personnel at the top end of the club is going to be changing. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's really important to have somebody who acts as sort of like a conduit between moments. And I think Marina needs to be that person. I think it's really important that she stays around, because one, she knows how the club operates. Whether it's going to change how it operates or not, she's going to be important to it. The other thing is, I think people over hate Granovskaya. I really do, because I think she's actually the best in the world at what she does. And what she's really good at is getting a lot of money for players. That's what she's really good at is business negotiations for prices for players. And when you put it that way, it's her contributions are good, but they're not essential. And so you could say for that reason that she doesn't need to stay around, but she's the best at what she does. To a certain degree, it's good to have her around because she's the sort of person who in 1 year left in his contract got over 100 million for Eden Hazard, 60 million for Morata, like a ridiculous amount of money for players who either were leaving anyway, weren't that good, and is able to really negotiate a good price for these players. I think people get a bit upset when certain players come in for certain fees and things like that, but we've got to remember Marina doesn't do the scouting; she just negotiates the cost. And on the cost for a lot of things, like if they say this is the player we want, this is what he's valued at, go get him, right? And then that's what she has to do. So to a certain degree, like she's very, very good at that. So I think it's important that she stays around so she can continue to do that for whoever's new in ownership. And hopefully, hopefully as well, I think it comes with a little bit of a change in sort of how the club is run a little bit, and this is what I think Marina will be really, really good at, is if you have certain scouting targets, like if we run a little bit more like Liverpool are, where the aim is to do things off of sort of almost like a Moneyball approach with like statistics and things like that, then you've got a really specific understanding of what players you need and what kind of profile you need. And then from that, Marina, who is very good at what she does, can do what she does and goes out and gets a player, and gets them for a certain price. And that's what she'll have to do. And, on top of all of that, like I said, just for the stability of the club, I think it's important to keep her around because, she wins awards and things like that, but that's not really, like what she's all about. But she wins them for a reason. She's absolutely ruthless, and that's what Chelsea is, and you need to keep that DNA in the whole club. So I think she needs to stay.
No, 100%, mate. Couldn't agree with you more on that front. I mean, moving forward, I think I'd perhaps maybe like to see a director of football put in place potentially. But that's obviously a conversation for another day. But yeah, obviously the next thing up in the ownership situation is the week commencing April 18th is when hopefully preferred bidder will be taken to the government to, I guess, for their kind of seal of approval or whatever. Just a quick update on that. Obviously, Stephen Pagliuca, the Boston Celtics, I think it's Boston Celtics owner, and obviously has 55% share in Serie A side Atalanta. He's been the guy that we've heard the least about publicly. He was actually at the Southampton game at the weekend, and he's welcomed on board to his bid the chairman or owner of the chairman, I suppose, or the owner of the NBA, and the co-founder of Facebook as well. So obviously plenty of wealth behind that bid. Obviously its net worth is useless unless, it's all very well being worth X billion, but if you're only going to put a few hundred million into the club, it's pointless. So yeah, I mean, some updates there. So we'll see how that progresses in the weeks to come. But mate, let's move into the final part. Then I'm going to bring up the lineup on screen, and we're going to put together a team that we'd like to see for tomorrow night. So I've got it as a back five, as we discussed earlier. This one is very much going to be not really much conversation. Edouard Mendy
it's got to be him, hasn't it?
It's definitely going to play in goal. Not really a lot to talk about there. I would imagine, Oli, that two of your back five are going to be Rudiger and Thiago Silva. I think
that is correct.
They basically pick themselves. And this is where it's a little bit up for debate. For me, it's not going to be Trevor Chalobah. We don't know how fit Azpilicueta is. Do you think that there's a potential? I mean, I'd personally probably go with Andreas Christensen again. I know he didn't play. I know he had a horror show in that first leg, but it wasn't all on him. The Reece James wasn't helping out a lot defensively. There's a massive gap between him and Christensen, which is why Vinicius had so much space. I'd personally go with with Christensen. Do you think though there's any chance that potentially Azpilicueta could slot into that back three?
I would actually prefer Aspi, I think.
Yeah.
One, because it's nice to have your captain on the pitch. And if he's not playing as wing back, he should be at least in the centre back. There's certain questions about whether, around the tactical reasons that Christensen was really found out. But last week, he just looked like a player who did not want to play for the club. And that's quite a disappointing thing to see, especially, as he's probably going to be leaving this summer. I think the only issue is they won so emphatically with Christensen in that position, and it looked like Vinicius was catching him out so often that there might almost be like a mental thing there. Do you want to do the same thing again and risk the same thing again? And I personally wouldn't. I would want to put Azpilicueta there. I think he's a little bit less defensively naive than Christensen personally.
Yeah.
He makes me laugh, Aspi, because he's got every single trick in the book, but he's the nicest person in the whole world. But I think that's what you need in a game like this. You need someone who's got every single trick up their sleeve.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I can see the value of having your leader on the pitch. My only slight concern is how fit he is and the fact that he's not played as a right-sided centre-back in a three for quite a while. And plus, I know
he's not that tall either.
No, I know Christensen's not the quickest, but he's quicker than Aspi. And Aspi is definitely not going to is going to struggle to keep up with Vinicius pace-wise. But
it's certainly 50-50, I think.
Yeah,
about who goes in.
Yeah, if Azpilicueta is not fit, then it's definitely Christensen for you. If that was.
Well, it's not going to be Malang Sarr, is it?
No, it's not. Right wing back, very obvious. Reece James
picks himself.
There was slight thought: could you play Reece James as right centre back to perhaps try and counteract Vinicius a bit more and have maybe Azpilicueta out at right wing back? But I think Reece James is our most attacking threat. We need our best players in their best positions, and to put Reece James in the back three would nullify his attacking threat, and we need goals.
And it changes who you go with, I think. It's weird because if you put Reece James affects the game so much that if you put him at centre-back, then you have to put Alonso or Azpi at left-back, right?
Yeah.
Probably Azpi, because you need your captain on the pitch, and you'd actually rather have Loftus-Cheek bombing on from wing-back at that point. Because he's a bit more attacking. So if you add in Reece James anywhere except right wing back, you kind of have to change the structure of the whole team.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And RD in the chat saying that Reece needs to track back more. I think that's probably something that he does need to add to his game. True. He didn't help. He did leave Christensen exposed quite a lot in that first leg, and Tuchel did say he made a mistake in that. So hopefully that's going to be one of the things that is rectified for this second leg. So we don't want to see that again. Left wing back then, probably going to be Marcos Alonso by all accounts. Hopefully, because he's back in Spain, he might put in a decent performance. It's a good performance against Southampton, got on the score sheet, and we need goals. And he's an attacking.
I think he's played well
forwards.
recently.
Yeah.
For all of the dogging that everybody does on Alonso all the time, he's actually been a half decent servant to the club. I think he's done really well recently. Knows where the goal is as well. That's really important in our wing back system. He doesn't do the same thing as Chilwell does, where he sort of does the underlapping runs and bombing on, because he's just not either fast enough or fit enough to be like that. But if you know where the goal is, and he gets the ball, he's always going to have a good chance. And especially on sort of like the edge of the box, where on almost like on the corner of the box where he receives the ball, sometimes he can be really, really dangerous.
Yeah, no, 100%. I know we saw Azpilicueta at left wing back in the first leg. I doubt we're going to see that again, just for the fact that we need goals. So I think if Azpi is going to play, it will be in the back three. Otherwise, I think he'll be on the bench. So Alonso, is in there. Midfield too, we spoke about it earlier. One name that we both, I think we're going to agree on both of them. Mateo Kovacic has to play. It was a mistake not to play him against Brentford. It was a mistake not to start him in the first leg. I don't think Tuchel's going to make the mistake in both legs of this game. He's the most important midfield player. He's got energy. He gets forward. He's got a good pass on him, links midfield and attack, can defend as well, covers a lot of ground. Chelsea's probably most important player. I think definitely our best all-round midfielder. So Kovacic to start is an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure.
And then partnering him is going to be Kante for the reasons we said earlier, and the fact that this game is not really set up for Jorginho's skill set. Well, certainly from the off, he could obviously come on and do a job if we're defending something. But yeah, Kante to go alongside Kovacic, I think is what we'd like to see. And obviously, what I was referring to earlier is that obviously, we've got it up as a 3-4-3, but it can also very easily, when we're defending, this right side player, who could be Mason Mount, would drop in like that, and it would almost become a front two when defending like that. So there's definitely fluidity within that system to do bits. Mason Mount, not by his high standards, not been in the best of form in recent weeks. Kind of spent more time flicking his hair than he had, contributing on the pitch.
I think he saw it, I think he saw that, and that's why he cut his hair.
Was pissed. Yeah, but he got a bit of a buzz cut, and suddenly, he's a Portsmouth lad, loves obviously, really fired up to play at Southampton, got 2 goals and had a fantastic performance. And for all the criticism,
call him Mason Mohawk, I love it.
Yeah, all the criticism that there's been of Mount this season, I've criticised him when he's not performed well, and rightly so. Should be held to the same account as every other Chelsea player. But having said all that, he's got 10 goals and 8 assists, 18 goal contributions in the Premier League. Only Mo Salah and Heung-min Son have got more than him. So for all the slander he gets, he's actually having a very good season. And people will say, he's stat padded against Norwich and whatnot. yeah, okay, someone's got to score the goals, like against the lesser sides. It's not all about doing it just in the big games. You've got to perform most weeks, and he returned to his best. And I think he is a shoo-in to start in this game, not just for his on the ball, but for his off the ball work rate as well. And his pressing from the front is going to be really important as well. So Mason Mount on that right hand side for you.
Yeah, probably on the right hand side. Actually, you know what? I don't know whether to play him on the right or the left, but definitely one of the wingers.
Yeah, no, 100%. And moving to that left hand side, then we've said it's not going to be Timo Werner. Callum Hudson-Odoi is injured. It's probably I'd probably just go with Christian Pulisic over Hakim Ziyech. But do you think there's a chance that Ziyech could potentially get the nod over Pulisic?
I think it's more likely that Pulisic plays and Ziyech comes on if we need creativity.
Yeah. Pulisic needs. He's been one of our better forward players recently, but again, I thought he was very poor against Real Madrid in the first leg, as were the vast majority of the players, other than Kai Havertz. But what really disappointed me in the first leg was that the attacking players, no one was prepared to take anyone on or try and run at anyone or make something happen. Every time they got the ball, it was just hold on to it for a bit, turn around and pass it backwards. And
it was quite pedestrian, wasn't it?
It was. There was no urgency in the game, and that's got to change tomorrow. Pulisic scored, obviously, last time he played Real Madrid away. I know it wasn't in the Bernabeu; it was at Valdebebas, the training ground stadium. But he has played well, and he has got that unique skill set, Pulisic, that not really any of our other forward players have got. It's just whether he's consistent enough on the day. But I do agree that he should play in this game over Ziyech, and Ziyech can be brought on to make a difference as the game goes on. But Pulisic, like everyone else, does need to step up and put in a serious performance. Moving on to the centre forward, then it's obviously going to be Kai Havertz. How impressed have you been with Kai Havertz? In really all of last month, he was fantastic, and he's carried on that good form. And we're finally starting to see the player that we paid that money for, and he's kind of made that number 9 position as such his own. How impressed have you been with his kind of, I guess, coming of age, I suppose, since he joined? Because he has struggled since he joined, really. And this last month or so, he's really kicked on.
I think he's done really well. He's gone up a gear, for sure. I think part of it is, just as he gets a bit older, becomes a bit more mature, understands his role in the team, works really well with Tuchel. I think the other part as well is, I think he's got a really good mentality as well. To be honest, I think it's something that the likes of Lukaku and Werner could learn a thing or two from, about coming in and struggling and spending your time on the bench and taking your licks and then taking your opportunities when you get them. And for that, I think he's been exemplary. And so I just think he's done an excellent job. All throughout the takeover process and everything, he's been really, really solid. He's come out with a lot of interesting comments in the media about, he'll, if we've got to take a bus, that's what we'll do, and all the rest of it. He'll pay for the transport or whatever. We didn't have to do that, but it shows how committed he is to this team, and you can see that in the way he plays as well, because he's on fire at the moment.
Yeah, he gives 100%, and I think he's actually, he's taken the time to work hard off the pitch. It looks like he's, bulked up a little bit. He's a lot more physical now. You need to be physical in the Premier League, which I think is one criticism of Timo Werner. He's not really beefed up or got any stronger, really. Whereas Havertz has kind of taken it all in his stride. He's adapting to the league, and he's reaping the benefits of it with his performances. So he obviously slots in at the top end of the pitch there. So that's the team that we'd go with tomorrow. Wait and see what Thomas Tuchel goes with. Mate, just one question remains then. What are you thinking score-wise tomorrow night?
It's hard, isn't it? Because my head says something like 1-1, and we sort of dribble out of the Champions League in a bit of a less of a bang than more of a whimper, and then my heart says we win 3-0, 4-1.
Yeah.
So I always make it a personal goal of mine never to bet against Chelsea. So I'm gonna say we're gonna do it.
Yeah, you're going for the miracle in Madrid tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think there's no way they won't score. So I guess I'm saying we're going to win 4-1.
Mate, that would be quite something. And what a prediction that would be if that does come off. I mean, look, I'm like you. I can't go against Chelsea, but I just can't really envisage how we're gonna go and score 3 or 4 goals in a Bernabeu. I just can't really see where that's coming from. But as we said earlier, it's Chelsea, it's Champions League, it's Thomas Tuchel in charge. Stranger things have happened. Never say never. I mean, I personally, if I'm being realistic, I think we're more than capable of winning on the night, but I don't think we'll go through. So I can envisage maybe us winning maybe by 2-1 or something like that. But one final question, mate. If we happen to get to penalties, is Kepa coming on for the shootout? No.
That ship has sailed.
No, that's done. No, fair enough. I think I actually agree with you on that. I think Mendy should probably stay on for the shootout.
Well, I don't think he's bad at penalties either. He saved one. Before the whole sort of fiasco at Wembley, he saved one for Senegal and sent them through to, was it the World Cup, or made them qualify for the World Cup?
Won the African Nations Cup as well.
Yeah,
penalty shootout. Yeah,
exactly. Mendy's not a bad penalty. Bad with penalties at all.
No, he's not.
I think Kepa's more of a specialist, and I think if Kepa had more confidence, and maybe if we'd won, it's one of those things. If we had won the FA Cup, then everyone would be saying, yeah, absolutely, bring Kepa on. But because Kepa missed his, and that was the reason. Sorry, I think that ship sailed.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. But it's certainly going to be could be a historic night in the Bernabeu tomorrow. As long as Chelsea give 100% effort, leave everything out there on the pitch, what will be. And obviously, we'll take the rest of the season in our stride and readjust those goals. But it's got to be full steam ahead to tomorrow, 100% effort from the guys, and we can definitely do it. Everything's got to go right. But as always, we keep the faith and we never say never. Oli, thank you so much for your time, mate. Guys, make sure you check out Oli's Twitter. I've linked them in the description below, so click on there, give him a follow, some great stuff on there. Guys, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. If you're tuned in live now, you're not subscribed, please just click that subscribe button. It takes you less than 10 seconds. It's free, and it does really help me out. And please do smash a like on this video. And hopefully, tomorrow night, we witness something special. But regardless, I'll be back on Wednesday for the match reaction and hopefully celebrating a special night. But if not, that's the way it goes. But as always, we keep the faith and up the Chelsea.